What if I told you that some people simply vanish from this world without ever experiencing death? It sounds like a sci-fi plot, but this actually happened. Three men in the Bible were taken by God in such an extraordinary way that, even today, their stories challenge our understanding of life and existence. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. Enoch walked with God and disappeared without a trace. And the third story? It hasn't happened yet, and it might involve you. Since ancient times, death has been humanity's greatest mystery and its only certainty. Philosophers, scientists, and religious scholars have long sought to understand its meaning, but only the Bible gives us glimpses of what truly lies beyond. And among so many stories, these three men break every known rule. How could Elijah be taken up before his disciples' very eyes? What made Enoch so special that God simply took him? And what does all of this reveal about the future rapture promised to Christians? If you've ever reflected on what happens after death, about eternal life, or even about biblical prophecies, this journey will open your mind to a whole new understanding. There is something much greater behind these stories, something that points to a divine plan that could completely change the way we view our final destiny. Throughout this exploration, you will uncover the fascinating details of Elijah's miraculous departure, understand how Enoch's unwavering faith made him a unique example, and unlock the mystery of the rapture prophesied in 1 Thessalonians 4:1-3:18. But don't think of this as just another religious study. This is a revelation that could impact your own life. So, get ready, because what you are about to discover might change the way you see faith, eternity, and even your own future. Let's dive into this mystery together and find the answers that have intrigued humanity for so long. Elijah was no ordinary prophet. In dark times, when idolatry and corruption had taken over Israel under the reign of Ahab and Jezebel, he was a fearless voice that challenged kings, confronted false prophets, and witnessed astonishing miracles. But the most incredible event was yet to come. His departure from this world was unlike any other. Elijah never tasted death, was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, right before the astonished eyes of his disciple Elisha. Elijah's final journey was not random. Every place he passed before his ascension, Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, and finally, the Jordan River, represented important spiritual milestones. Gilgal symbolized renewal and the beginning of a walk with God. Bethel, the house of God, was a reminder of the importance of communion. Jericho signified faith that breaks down walls, and the Jordan marked the passage into a new stage. Nothing in his path was by chance. When Elijah and Elisha arrived at the banks of the Jordan River, something extraordinary happened. Elijah took his mantle, struck the waters, and they parted, allowing both to cross on dry ground. This miracle immediately reminds us of Moses parting the Red Sea and Joshua leading Israel into the Promised Land. The symbolism is profound. God's power always opens paths for those who walk by faith. As they crossed, Elijah asked Elisha what he would like to receive before his departure. Without hesitation, Elisha requested a double portion of Elijah's spirit. This request wasn't about status or power, it was about being able to continue the mission of his master. For a disciple, this was the equivalent of asking for a spiritual birthright. But there was a condition: he would only receive it if he witnessed Elijah's ascension. Suddenly, the heavens opened and a whirlwind appeared. A chariot of fire, pulled by flaming horses, descended from the sky and carried Elijah away before Elisha's eyes. Imagine the scene. The impact was so overwhelming that Elisha tore his clothes in grief and reverence. Elijah was gone, but his mission would live on through his successor. The image of the chariot of fire is one of the most iconic in the Bible. Fire often symbolizes God's presence and divine judgment, as seen in the burning bush with Moses and the fire that descended on Mount Carmel against the prophets of Baal. But this time, the fire did not come to consume, but to elevate. Elijah was taken without tasting death, a rare privilege granted to only a few in history. The connection between Elijah and the future rapture of Christians is undeniable. His supernatural departure foreshadows what Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians 4:1 3:18 one day. Those who remain faithful will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air without experiencing death. Elijah serves as a prototype of what is yet to come for those who trust in God. Another fascinating detail is that Elijah did not completely disappear from the biblical narrative. Centuries later, he appears again alongside Moses during Jesus' transfiguration, an event that revealed divine glory. This shows that his mission transcends time and points to something much greater than his own era. The fact that God took Elijah without him experiencing death makes us reflect on our own journey of faith. Are we prepared for the day we will be called? Does our life reflect the same confidence and obedience that Elijah demonstrated? These questions challenge us to see his story not as something distant, but as a mirror for our own spiritual walk. Elijah was a man who experienced highs and lows, fled to the wilderness, felt fear, and endured loneliness. But in the end, he fully trusted God and fulfilled his mission. This reminds us that it's not about never failing, but about remaining faithful to God's purpose. And this faithfulness can lead us to experience supernatural moments that defy all human logic. Elijah's journey did not end with his ascension. It continues to live on in every person who chooses to walk with God with the same boldness. His legacy invites us to believe in the impossible and to understand that there's so much more waiting for those who trust in the Lord. And now, get ready, because the story of the next man who never died takes us to an even deeper level of communion with God. Let's talk about Enoch, the man who walked with God until he vanished. Since the beginning of humanity, death has been seen as an unavoidable destiny. All the great patriarchs mentioned in the genealogy of Genesis share one common detail: the phrase, "and he died," follows the description of their lives. But in the middle of this pattern, one name stands out: Enoch. The Bible does not say that he died. Instead, it declares Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, because God took him, Genesis 5:24. But who was this mysterious man? Why was he given such an extraordinary fate? To understand, we need to look at the life he lived. Unlike many around him, Enoch walked in deep communion with God, something that set him apart from a generation. While the world around him became more corrupt, he chose a different path, a path of faith and intimacy with the Creator. The phrase "walked with God" does not simply mean that he was a religious man. It means that his entire life was aligned with the divine will. He didn't just believe in God, lived that faith daily in an ongoing relationship. Imagine someone who does not need visible signs to believe, who does not rely on material blessings to remain faithful. That was Enoch, a man who walked with full confidence that God was real and present in his journey. Interestingly, Enoch lived for 365 years, a number that symbolically reminds us of something constant and complete, like the days of a year. His walk with God was not temporary or occasional, it was a lifelong commitment. And the result of that faith was something unprecedented. God simply took him. He never experienced death like the others. This foreshadows the prophecy given to Christians about the rapture. The promise in 1 Thessalonians 4:1 3:18 describes a moment when believers will be taken from the earth to meet the Lord in the air. Enoch was a preview of this event. His story shows us that God has the power to transport his faithful directly into eternity without them experiencing death. What makes Enoch's story even more fascinating is that he was not just a righteous man, was also a prophet. In the book of Jude, verse 14, we learn that he prophesied about divine judgment coming upon the ungodly. In other words, he didn't just live in communion with God, he also warned his generation about the consequences of a life separated from the Creator. This teaches us a powerful lesson. Walking with God does not mean isolating ourselves from the world, but being a beacon of light in the midst of darkness. Enoch did not hide. He lived his faith actively, to the point that his life became such a strong testimony that God decided to spare him from death. Now, imagine the scene. One ordinary day, as he walked, prayed, or spoke about God, Enoch simply vanished. His family and friends must have searched for him, but they never found a trace. What happened? God took him. He was promoted directly to eternity, without having to pass through the valley of the shadow of death. This raises a profound reflection. Are we walking with God the way Enoch did? Many believe in God, but do they have an intimate relationship with him? Do they live according to his will? Or do they simply follow empty rituals? Enoch's story challenges us to have a living faith, not just a theoretical one. And the most amazing thing is that the Bible teaches us that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If he could take Enoch without him experiencing death, he can also fulfill the promise of the rapture for those who walk with him. This is not just a mystical idea, but a spiritual reality for those who believe. If there's one thing we can learn from Enoch, it's that true communion with God transcends this world. He didn't just follow God, lived so intensely in his presence that his destiny was completely different from everyone else around him. He was taken before the flood, just as the church will be taken before the Great Tribulation. Enoch's journey is an invitation to each of us. Are we just living, or are we truly walking with God? His story proves that something far greater awaits those who choose the path of faith. And now, we arrive at the final part of this incredible mystery, the rapture of Christians. Just as Enoch was taken before the judgment of his time, there's a prophecy that millions will disappear from the earth in a future event. Let's explore this next. What if suddenly millions of people vanish from the earth? Imagine planes without pilots, cars without drivers, empty chairs in offices, and homes all happening in the blink of an eye. This is not a science fiction plot, it is the biblical description of the rapture, an event prophesied thousands of years ago and eagerly awaited by Christians to this day. The idea of the rapture may sound surreal, but it is deeply rooted in Scripture. In 1 Thessalonians 4:1-3-1-8, the Apostle Paul reveals a mystery. One day, those who died in Christ will rise first, and then the believers who are still alive will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. There will be no prior warning, no scientific explanation. Those who belong to God will simply be taken from this world. If we look at biblical history, we will see that the rapture is not a new concept. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind without experiencing death. Enoch walked with God and was taken. These events were previews of what will happen on a global scale. What happened to one man and later to a prophet will happen all at once to those who are ready for God's calling. But why would God do this? The answer is tied to divine judgment. The Bible teaches that before the Great Tribulation, a period of chaos, suffering, and judgment upon a world that has rejected God, he will remove those who belong to him. Just as Noah was saved before the flood and Lot was taken out of Sodom before its destruction, the faithful will be taken before God's wrath comes upon the earth. Many wonder, how can I be sure I am ready for the rapture? The answer is not in following religious rules or performing good deeds to earn a ticket to heaven. The Bible is clear: salvation comes through faith in Jesus Christ. Those who accept Christ and live in communion with God are part of this supernatural plan. It's not about being perfect, but about true surrender and commitment to faith. The truth is, the rapture will be a defining moment. For those who are taken, it will be the most glorious moment in history. For those who are left behind, it will be a terrifying shock. Imagine the despair of those who realize they missed the opportunity. By then, it will be too late to seek answers. The time to prepare is now. This prophecy also challenges us to live differently. If we truly believe that Christ could return at any moment, how are we living? Are we caught up in the worries of this world, investing only in the here and now? Or are we cultivating a genuine relationship with God, ready for the moment he calls us? The rapture is not a metaphor or a distant possibility. With each passing day, the signs of the end times become more evident. Wars, natural disasters, apostasy, and increasing immorality, all of these were prophesied and are unfolding before our eyes. Global events seem to be aligning for something greater. Are we prepared? This expectation should motivate us to share this truth with others. If we know that something so grand and irreversible is about to happen, We cannot keep this information to ourselves. Just as Elijah left Elisha prepared, our mission is to warn as many people as possible. After all, the rapture is not just a spectacular event, it is an eternal separation between those who will be with God and those who will remain without Him. But while many live carelessly, mocking the idea of the rapture, the Bible warns that it will happen suddenly, like a thief in the night. There will be no special warning, no second chance. Just as Enoch was suddenly taken and Elijah was carried away before the astonished eyes of Elisha, the day will come when millions will disappear and the world will never be the same. With that in mind, the most important question is, what about you? Are you ready for that day? The rapture is not a topic to create fear, but to awaken our faith. It is God's promise to those who live in communion with Him. Elijah and Enoch did not fear because they already walked with the Lord. The only way to be ready is to live daily in that connection with God. Now that we have unveiled the mystery of the three men who never died, we reach the most important moment. What will you do with this knowledge? How can it transform your life from today onward? Because if there's one thing the story of Elijah, Enoch, and the prophecy of the rapture teaches us, it's that life doesn't end here. There is something much greater than this visible world. What makes these stories so fascinating is not just the fact that these men were taken without experiencing death, but rather the reason why it happened. Elijah was raptured because he fulfilled his mission with faithfulness. Enoch was taken because his communion with God was so deep that it no longer made sense for him to remain here. And the future rapture? It will not be random, it will be the separation of those who belong to God from those who chose to live without Him. With that in mind, I ask you, are you living a life that reflects this communion? If the rapture were to happen today, would you be among those who will be taken or among those who will be left behind? The Bible warns us that this day will come like a thief in the night unexpected, without warning. But hey, raise the real question, will it truly be unexpected for those who walk with God? And what if the rapture doesn't happen in your lifetime? How are you handling the certainty of eternity? Because sooner or later, each of us will have to face that reality. The difference lies in how we choose to live until that moment arrives. Maybe you're thinking, but I'm not perfect. Guess what? Elijah wasn't either. He was afraid, he fled, he felt alone. Enoch lived in a corrupt generation. What set them apart was not the absence of flaws, but the presence of faith. And that is exactly what God expects from us. The Bible teaches us that God is not looking for perfect people, but for hearts willing to walk with Him. Elijah had his moment of discouragement, but he got back up. Enoch chose to walk with God in difficult times. Just like them, you can make that decision too. There is still time, but that time is not infinite. Now I want you to take a moment for serious reflection. What are you prioritizing in your life? Do your time, energy, and decisions reflect someone who is ready to meet God at any moment? Or have the worries of daily life hold you away from what really matters? The rapture is not meant to scare you. It is a promise for those who live by faith. But it is also a warning. Are we truly prepared? If this message spoke to you, don't ignore this opportunity. God is calling you to a deeper level of relationship. He wants you to walk with Him like Enoch, to fulfill your mission like Elijah, and to be ready for the day He comes for His people. And now, I want to challenge you. Comment below if you believe in a rapture and how this message has impacted you. Let's build a community that seeks the truth and prepares for what's coming. And of course, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. If this word was important to you, imagine how many other people could be impacted. See you in the next video. May you always be ready for what God has prepared.